Okay, so today is Thursday, um, October 17th, I think. I was just making a recording now, and I was just like, essentially, I was yapping, right? I was just going off. So essentially, when I was talking, but this one I want to make it short and direct. What I want to talk about today is, like, where did like all this like Neanderthals come from? Like, where did they come from? Where did Homo sapien, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo, all those Homo minus like Homo sapien, which is supposed to be mankind in its current state, where did they all come from, right? So, like, the scientific explanation to that is evolution. Mankind evolved, right? But if you're like a religious person, if you're like a Christian, the Bible says that God created man. So, if God created man, then how do you explain Homo erectus? How do you explain Homo habilis? How do you explain Homo sapiens? All those other creatures? How do you explain them? Right now, you have like one or two choices. Is it that you dismiss it and say, it's a lie, it was made up, it's fake, it's just scientific gibberish to try to desperately try to support the theory of evolution, or you take a higher ground, if you will, and say, God created everything. God made everything. God made man, and God made all this Homo habilis, Homo sapien, Homo erectus, all these things, and be like, it was God that did it. God made human beings, and God made all these things. And that would not make any sense when you think about it, because when you look at because pattern recognition, just basic pattern recognition. If you look at everything God made, essentially, so from Homo habilis to Homo erectus to Homo sapien, there's actually progression. You could actually see literal iteration. Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like it's like a piece of like software. It's almost like I'm trying to look like cars. Let's use cars for example. It's almost as if how man went from bicycles to motors to cars, and now we have like self-driving cars. You could like it's iteration. You could see like pure iteration, like a pure skill. You could see it, yeah. And when you look at God, right? God does not do skill, right? When God creates, God creates perfectly. Like, there's no skill with God. He's just perfect. Do you understand? The earth was created perfectly according to the Bible. It didn't have to scale it. It didn't go from one phase to phase 2, phase 3. No. It's just direct. When God made Adam was a full-formed human being. Bam. When God made Eve, full-formed human being. Bam. Nothing like scale. There was no scale involved. It was just directly. No iteration. It was direct. It was perfect. And according to the Bible says when he looked at everything, after the old creation, he looked at everything and it was like, it was perfect, right? So that kind of like dismisses and you look at all these other animals too, right? You don't see this instance of like, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's this instance of like Homo erectus, Homo habilis with all these other animals too. You just like, so essentially the whole theory about saying God created them is also very off. Like, it doesn't make any sense, you see, because God, if you are using pattern recognition, God does not move like that. God is like a perfectionist. It just makes perfect stuff. Now, so if God makes perfect stuff, who makes imperfect stuff? Who does iterations? Who does sequential things? Well, again, like I alluded earlier, right? Human beings, right? Human beings do all that, right? So man went from bicycles from horses. Let's start with horses. From horses to chariots to bicycles to cars, and now we have to diesel cars or petrol cars, and now we have like self-driving cars, electric self-driving cars. You can see iteration right there. Right. So anywhere there's any form of iteration, usually it's mankind. Is man trying to like improve on his last effort. Anywhere you see iteration, right? Now, another theory, kind of far-fetched, is this idea that this is more of like a Sumerian thing, that there was like this race of like intelligent beings that came down and helped mankind to like engineered mankind into where they are today. So mankind was basically like a race of like monkeys, and then this aliens essentially came down and they engineered the DNA of mankind, and then mankind became sentient somewhat, if you will, and that's how we got to where we are today. And that theory is, like I said, it doesn't really have a lot of legs to stand on, because it's mostly one culture that kind of like lays hold to that stake, which is the Sumerians, yeah. And they have all this like they have this list of gods, and like they're called the Anunnaki, if you will. I think Sargon, and the amount of time they spent ruling the earth and stuff like that, right? But I'll just kind of, like I said, I'll talk that all that the rug, because that is not like very. It doesn't have a lot of legs to stand on. There are not a lot of cultures in the world that has that perspective, right? So if we're using pattern recognition, we can say it's not God that created all these Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapien. It's not God that created it, right? Okay, cool. Because God does not do scale. God just does perfection. It just God goes from 0 to 100. It just appears at 100. It doesn't do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. 0, 100. The only person that we are aware of that does 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is man, is human beings, right? So I was just thinking about it today. Like, what if all this like Homo erectus, Homo sapien, like Lucy, all these Neanderthals, right? What if they're actually man's creation? You see, what if artificial intelligence and AGI and Elon Musk's We Robot and all this like, and Boston Dynamics and all this like humanoids that they're trying to create? What if this is not the first time man has attempted to recreate himself? What if this is not the first time that man has like, what if this is not their first attempt? Maybe this is what man has been trying from the scratch, right? So maybe what if Adam and Eve actually created all this like Neanderthals? Yeah, it sounds crazy, right? But what if they were the ones actually behind it? Do you understand? Because according to the Bible, when you read the Bible, there are some very weird stuff in that Genesis when you read it. Like, for instance, the Bible talking about how, Adam essentially was like God. He was God. The Bible says him and God will come down, and then two of them will be talking together. They will be discussing. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? Like, and he was also very intelligent because he names the animals. But I think theologically, people have kind of like, maybe in a way in a bid to try to make God like look superior to Adam, because they didn't want them to look equal. So they kind of like relegated Adam to this like naming ceremony master. The only thing he could do was, God did all the creation, Adam did all the naming of all the creators, and that's the end of it, right? But if Adam was like God, exactly like God, right? Smart enough to have a conversation with God, meaningful conversation, because let's be honest with you, if God came down now and him and me, we started talking, right? Everything he says will not make any sense to me. I'll just start laughing, Which, case in point, is actually happened in the Bible, because when God was talking to Abraham and Sarah was just laughing. Why? Because what God was saying was not intelligible. Why was it not intelligible? Well, because God was ahead of her. In terms of intelligence, God was like light years ahead of her, right? The height of intelligence is not higher intelligence. The height of intelligence is stupidity, If you encounter someone from like a type 3, type 4 civilization, the person not going to sound very intelligent to you. It's going to sound stupid. They're like, what are you saying? Like, I'm not making any sense. They're just saying nonsense. Why? Because you can't even, your brain cannot process where that person is coming from because it's just so ahead of you in terms of like raw intelligence, right? I believe AI is also going to get to that point where, people think the end is AGI, but I think people are eventually going to abandon the old AI project because they are going to get so smart to a point where they're not making any sense again to us. And you're like, what is this thing even fucking saying? Get the fuck out. Let's shut down all these things. I think that's the end of companies like OpenAI, and I don't think it's AGI. I think it's, I don't know, AFI, if you will, like artificial foolish intelligence, like, because it's so smart now that it's just you're not even communicating again. Like, what are you saying? Right? Okay, so sorry, on a more serious note, right? So from a theological perspective, they always try to like limit Adam, like, look, okay, Adam and Eve, like, okay, the two of them, they were like God, they were as smart as God, they were like, God did all the creation, Adam did all the naming, right? But what if God did the creation of Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve actually also made their own stuff? Because they're human, and that's what humans do. Humans create, and Bible says we're like co-creators with God. So what if Adam and Eve actually made the Neanderthals, right? And it makes sense because like when they were kicked out, when Cain killed Abel, right? He was saying, God was like, okay, they're not going to die. And it was like, well, what about people, all these people, if they will kill me? And meanwhile, at that time on earth, it was only Adam and Eve. And Cain, that was supposedly supposed to be on earth. And Cain was making all these references to other people that would kill him. So if there are only 3 people on earth, who are the other people that will kill you? Well, maybe Adam and Eve actually sat down and created these Neanderthals. And it will make sense because, like I said, it follows the pattern of mankind, this pattern of like iteration. You make a first iteration of something, doesn't really look very nice, and then you do like a second iteration of it, and then you do like a third iteration of it, and then you do like a fourth iteration of it, and then every iteration, every new version you create is getting better, is getting smarter, and maybe that process was interrupted by, maybe before they got to this sapien, recreating a perfect human being, that process was interrupted. Maybe it was interrupted by the old snake eating like a forbidden fruit saga, right? Do you understand? Something always seems to always interrupt that process of like, maybe it will be interrupted too again. Maybe before we get to the point where we reach AGI, right? Maybe there's another interruption that's going to happen. Maybe another COVID-19. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the world is going to reset. We don't fucking know. We don't know, right? We don't know, right? But I was just thinking about it today that, if you think closely about, there are 1,001 theories about how those like Neanderthals came into being, but nobody ever talks about the possibility that they're actually the creation of mankind. We see pyramids and we say, pyramids are creations of like human beings. Yes. Pyramid. We don't doubt it. I'm watching Graham Hancock. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Now he's talking about Göbekli Tepe. He's talking about all these like archaeological marvels, right? We see all these things and we go, hey, they're created by human beings. And then we see the Neanderthals and then we go, it's nature. Like, bruh, it looks like something a fellow human being would make. Like, it looks very, 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 it has human being written all over it. Like, especially with the, like, again, like I said, with the iteration, it looks like a work that spanned multiple, maybe thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, So I just wanted to, put that down, because if that was like remotely true, then not only would it will make a lot of sense. A lot of things, at least in my own head, will make sense. Like, this thirst that we have right now as a species to like, with AI and all these GPTs floating around, right? I think I'll be able to make sense of it. Yeah, so I just wanted to make it, like, talk about this possibility that maybe it was Adam and Eve that actually co-created this, like, they fathered, essentially, they created this, like, Homo sapien, Homo habilis, these Neanderthals, essentially. And that will also explain stuff like, I don't know. Yeah, so, yeah. And so that's it. There's a deeper conversation about how all these things might scale, and how I don't want to talk about it, but yeah, I just want to keep this one very short and very quick. And yeah, that's it.